A life-changing discovery. Get ready for a mind-blowing story from our space, where unexpected twists are sure to keep you on the edge of your seat. Before you grab your partner's phone, make sure you're prepared for what you're about to uncover. Today, a husband learns the hard way that his wife has been unfaithful. After a fight, he divorces her, gives both her and her lover a taste of their own medicine, and watches as their marriage falls apart. There's something incredibly satisfying about reading stories on here, especially those about people getting revenge on their cheating partners. I never imagined I'd end up being one of those people writing in, seeking advice. But here I am, and life has never come at me faster. I'm a 34-year-old man, married to Fiona, 35, for 7 years. Our marriage was okay. I won't lie to myself and say it was perfect. There were a lot of fights, but love was still there. At least I thought so. It turns out I might have been the only one thinking that. Our relationship had its ups and downs, but we always made it work. At least, I thought we did. Let me start from the beginning. We had another fight, and I need to explain something important about Fiona. She has this terrible habit of completely shutting down when confronted. It doesn't matter if I'm aggressive or if I approach her as gently as possible. When she senses a confrontation, she locks up. She absolutely refuses to engage. It drives me insane because it means I can't hear her true thoughts or understand where she stands on the issues we face. As a result, I've learned to avoid arguments because that part of her behavior frustrates me so much. But despite avoiding arguments, they still happen. This particular argument was about having children. I've always been somewhat on the fence about it, leaning more towards not wanting kids. The moment the discussion started to get heated, she stopped talking entirely. This left me furious because it was an important issue, one that needed to be addressed. I needed to understand where she stood, and if she could hear me out on my side of things. But she just shut down, and it was maddening. So, I walked away from the conversation, leaving her in the living room. I went off to do other things around the house. Then, I noticed her typing furiously on her phone. Something told me she was venting to someone, perhaps one of her sisters or a close friend. After dealing with this silent treatment so many times, I was tired of being in the dark. This issue, especially, needed resolution. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I grabbed her phone when the chance arose. At first, I didn't find anything of concern. Her messages with her sisters were filled with family drama, nothing out of the ordinary. But then I checked her text with one of her close girlfriends, and that's when everything took a turn. There was barely any mention of our argument, at least not directly. But at the start of the last conversation, Fiona briefly touched on the fight we had about kids. Then, the conversation took a shocking turn. Fiona shared with her friend, "It's getting harder not to entertain leaving him for Aaron, especially because we both definitely want a full house." When I read that, I felt a wave of dizziness. I had to sit down. It felt like a punch to the gut, and I could barely process what I had just read. That was the last thing I ever expected to find. I was glad that I had looked through her phone, because about 2 minutes later, Fiona walked into the room. But even then, I knew I had more digging to do. I needed to find out who this Aaron guy was. I already had an inkling that she was sleeping with him, but I had to get confirmation and figure out how long it had been going on. So, when I had the next opportunity, I searched for Aaron's name on her phone. Not only did I find his contacts saved, but I also saw that he had been mentioned several times in conversations with two of Fiona's close female friends. I was relieved to see that one of her friends was at least trying to reason with her, considering that Fiona was married. But it was clear that Fiona didn't listen, because that was the last time she brought Aaron up with that particular friend. The real details came from the conversations between Fiona and Aaron himself. The first message between them dated back a little over a year, and it was about work-related matters. That made it clear Aaron was one of Fiona's co-workers, someone she had never mentioned before. I couldn't go through their entire conversation history, but scrolling through the messages, it became clear that their relationship had evolved into something more than just work chats. As I kept scrolling, it was obvious that their exchanges had grown increasingly flirtatious. By the time I saw some of the photos they were sending each other, there was no doubt in my mind about the extent of their relationship. The images they shared were blatant and left no room for misinterpretation. And then, when I reached the most recent messages from the past week, I saw Aaron asking when they would see each other again. Given that they worked together, it was clear they were referring to meeting in an intimate context. That was the moment I knew for certain I was done with her. I took screenshots and recorded videos, documenting everything I could think of. I knew I had something huge, and Fiona had no idea I had uncovered it. The feeling of knowing something she didn't was strangely empowering. I could already feel my resentment building, and that only fueled my determination to make her feel the consequences. I wasn't going to roll over and let her think she'd gotten away with this. I was going to figure out the next steps and make sure she would understand the depth of what I knew. Edit. I've been thinking about it, and I believe I need to find out more about this Aaron guy. I want to know where he lives because I'm considering confronting him. I'm not looking for a fight, but I certainly won't shy away from one if it happens. I need someone to take this anger out on, and I think he might be a perfect target. Advice to myself. If you're ever in a similar situation, it's important to lay everything out on the table. Confront her with the truth calmly, but make sure she can't dodge the situation. Be prepared for whatever comes next, whether it's more lies or finally hearing the truth. Update 1. Okay, so this is the first update, and I hope it's one of very few. I've found out a significant piece of information about Fiona, my wife, who has been cheating on me with Aaron, her co-worker. I haven't done anything yet, but I've discovered something that will definitely help me plan my next steps. It turns out Aaron is married as well. His wife, Kate, is likely aware that he's been unfaithful, but she doesn't know the full extent of it. Just like me, she's kept in the dark. I'm not trying to control what she does, but I plan to make sure she knows what's going on. If I can get Aaron's marriage to fall apart, that would be a small victory in this whole mess. As for Fiona, I've started looking for divorce lawyers and have already narrowed it down to 2. I'm confident that whichever one I choose, they will help me get the results I want. I'm ready for whatever comes, and I want to make sure Fiona feels every bit of this hurt, right from when I serve her with the divorce papers. All I need to do now is hope everything goes according to plan. Update 2. I never thought exposing a cheating husband would turn out to be so beneficial for me. I'm glad I decided to take this route, because it's been paying off big time. Aaron's wife, Kate, is very pretty, which honestly makes me wonder why Aaron can't keep his hands off other women when he already has a beautiful wife at home. But we all know that cheating is rarely about looks. I decided to reach out to Kate over Facebook, and after a few days, she responded to my message. I told her I wanted to talk about something important concerning her husband, and we arranged to meet in person. Kate absolutely refused to meet up in a public place, saying that whatever I had to say could be told over text, no matter how heavy it might be. Honestly, I didn't want to do it this way, as it felt kind of cruel, but she was insistent. So, I started by telling her it was about her husband, hoping that might soften the blow. After some minutes, I made sure she had read it, and then I told her that her husband had been sleeping with my wife, Fiona. They had been having an affair for several months. It took over an hour before she replied with a simple, "Thank you." At first, I thought her response seemed a bit distant, so I asked if she was okay, but she said she was just tired of him and his antics. Apparently, this wasn't the first time she had caught him cheating. Twice before, she had confronted him and taken him back both times. But this time, it seemed he had been covering his tracks much better. She had no idea about the affair with Fiona. She had been kept in the dark, just like me. She told me she couldn't deal with him anymore and, out of nowhere, asked, "How about we meet up after all?" I had to read that message 5 times, as I couldn't believe what I was reading. At first, I thought I was misinterpreting it, but eventually I convinced myself I knew exactly what she was proposing. The crazy thing is, I've always seen marriage as something sacred, something that shouldn't be tainted by infidelity or betrayal. But that view shifted the moment I found out Fiona was cheating on me. It was as if the idea of marriage with her was no longer pure. From that point on, nothing seemed off limits. So, without a drop of shame, I met up with Kate at her house while our spouses were at work. We slept together, and the best part was, it was incredibly good. Some of you might argue that I'm as bad as Fiona, but I don't agree. I would never have done this if she hadn't cheated. The moment I found out about Aaron and Fiona, the marriage we had was over in my eyes. And to show just how little guilt I felt, it happened again and again. For me, it was just fun. There weren't any wedding bells or promises. Kate and I both knew it was temporary. We were just keeping things casual, though we both acknowledged it might not last forever. As for Fiona, it was time to get the divorce papers ready. Update 2. I completely understand why you're making moves to ensure Fiona feels the full weight of her actions. With Kate, I get it too. You're clearly in the middle of some very raw emotions, and deciding to connect with her in this way is a reflection of just how shaken your view on marriage has become. You have every right to be angry and want to hit back. Update 3. I'm happy to say that the saga with my now ex-wife has finally come to an end, and it ended in a very satisfying way. At least for me. I can't speak for her, though. The first thing I did was get the divorce papers prepared. I had a process server serve her at work in the middle of her workday. Honestly, I wish I could have been there to see her reaction, but it was just as satisfying knowing she was getting those papers while I was staying calm. She called and messaged me repeatedly, but I didn't pick up any of them. She was furious, sending me angry messages, but she seemed mostly in disbelief. That night, she came home absolutely livid. Normally, I might have been concerned by how angry she was, but it was actually pretty entertaining. I might have chuckled one too many times, which only made her angrier. Eventually, she asked why I hadn't answered my phone, and that was the only question I allowed her to ask. I finally decided to answer, letting her know that I knew everything about her affair with Aaron. I knew about him being her co-worker, and I even knew she had wanted to have his children. Her face went pale as she realized just how much I knew. I dropped the bombshell that I had all the evidence I needed to destroy her in divorce court. I think she completely lost her composure at that point and lunged for my phone. I don't know if her intention was to destroy it or to try and delete the evidence, but I got to it first. Even if she had destroyed my phone, I had everything backed up, and my lawyer had copies too. She was completely unhinged at that point, and I told her to pack up her things and leave. But instead of doing that, she collapsed to the floor and started wailing. The final stages of the fallout, even after 3 hours of her curled up and sobbing, Fiona still hadn't made any attempt to leave the house. Unfortunately, since the house was legally co-owned, I couldn't just call the cops to remove her. When I finally got tired of her sobbing, I decided to leave the house myself. I think that's when it hit her just how much worse things had gotten, because she started calling me repeatedly just 5 minutes after I walked out. Her whole life was crashing down, and I felt a strange sense of joy in being the architect of her misery. The next time she saw me was when I came back to pick up some of my things. As I walked through the door, she literally crawled on the floor behind me, begging and pleading. She kept saying it was a mistake, but this wasn't just a one-time affair. It had been a long-term betrayal. Even if someone forgives cheating, it can never just be forgotten if it becomes a pattern of consistent deception. There was no way I was going to take her back. Despite that, I think she still thought there was a chance for a reconciliation. Eventually, the divorce proceedings began, and I was in a strong position. We earned roughly the same amount and, thank God, didn't have children. This made things easier, as there was little to split. Since she was the unfaithful party, I was able to secure the house. There was no reason for me to uproot my life just because she had cheated. I packed most of her things, and the police were on standby to prevent any drama when she came to collect them. Once she was out of the house, I genuinely felt free. While I probably wouldn't stay in the same place for long, it was nice to finally be rid of her. I later heard from Kate that she had started divorce proceedings with her own husband Aaron. That brings me to my final act of revenge. I asked Fiona to meet me at a local cafe, and she agreed, although she seemed confused about what I wanted. I told her I only had one thing to say. Before we got divorced, I made sure to get my own revenge. I slept with Aaron's wife multiple times. Her mouth dropped open, and she shook her head in disbelief. She claimed I didn't even know his wife, but I told her name and where they lived. That's when she finally believed me. Her hands shook, and I couldn't tell if she was about to cry or if she was consumed by rage. I didn't bother to find out. I walked away and left her there, feeling a sense of finality. The next workday, I spoke to Kate and let her know what I had planned. To my surprise, she had no objections as long as I didn't leave a trace of evidence. She told me when Aaron and she were both at work, and I made my way to their office. When I saw his car pull up, I stepped out and approached him. He looked confused, but when I introduced myself as Fiona's ex-husband, recognition flashed in his eyes. He stepped back, cautious, and I let him know I wasn't looking for a fight, unless he was. I stuck out my hand, and just as he was about to reach for it, I told him I had no hard feelings because I had slept with his wife, just as he had done with mine. His hand went down instantly, and for a moment, he seemed unsure of how to react. After a few seconds, he cursed me out and walked away. I was actually hoping he would throw a punch, just to give me an excuse to fight back, but that never happened. Kate told me that she moved out of the house that same day while Aaron was at work, which was why she wasn't worried about his reaction. I truly hope she gets everything she deserves in the divorce because, in my eyes, cheating partners are the worst. And that's the end of it. I'm glad to see the end of a very messy marriage, and now I can finally focus on the life ahead of me. Reflection on the story. What you did to both Fiona and Aaron might be the kind of revenge many people would secretly wish they could pull off. It was clear that you weren't going to let them off easy, and that sense of catharsis, of giving them a taste of the betrayal they handed you, was an important part of your healing process. Do you think Opie did the right thing? Why or why not? Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you next time.